You know, it's been fun going through Mark through Lent. We've been going through week by week looking at the different miracles kind of in every chapter and how they reveal Jesus to us. Now, today we're going to a chapter, which is chapter 5. So Jesus is kind of midway through his ministry. And this one gets interesting. This is a very, very interesting passage. Mark writes this, it's like a sandwich, like a story within a story. Audrey read the part we're really going to focus on, but there's another miracle kind of in the middle of it. You have, it starts with the story of Jairus, and then you have a healing of the woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. Then they finish the story about his daughter being healed. But what's really important is you get a sense of where we are with this. Let me give you a picture. Jesus has gotten popular. Everybody wants to know Jesus. Everybody wants to know what he's talking about. Everybody wants to watch what's happening. He's kind of the big show in town. He's been on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Gentile side, healing, doing all kinds of stuff. He's coming back probably to Capernaum, right here, Capernaum. And as he comes in, this is what he finds. Thousands of people. They're pushing, pressing, compressing. I mean, everybody wants to be a part of this because he's just what's exciting in town right now. So holding this thought, let's start with a word of prayer and say, Father, open up your word to us that we may see, that we may understand, that we may learn how to follow you more closely, abide in you, grab hold of you, so we can serve you with all of our heart. For it's in your name we pray. Amen. The story starts here in verse 21. Jesus had come back from the other side of the lake. He's now on the Jewish side of the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd gathered while he was by the lake, and something happens here that changes everything. You need to know at this point, and we started reading about it back in chapter 3, Mark let us know, that the Pharisees were so upset by Jesus' healing the man with the withered hand that they went out after that service to meet with the Herodians to plot how to kill Jesus. As part of that, I'm sure they went out and they told all the other synagogues around them, don't work with Jesus, don't talk to Jesus, don't be a part of this in any way. He's dangerous, he's hurting our people. So if you were in the synagogue, if you were a Pharisee, if you were a leader in that, you would know that. But here comes something in the midst of all this, it's utterly crazy. One of the synagogue leaders, okay, if this really is Capernaum and he's the synagogue leader, this is a big position. He manages the church. He runs everything, makes sure everything's running smoothly. It's a significant position. Everybody would know him. Everybody in town probably knew him. And one of these synagogue leaders, and we know his name, Jairus, which means his name must have been so well known that it was just natural for Mark to put it into the story. Came to Jesus, but he didn't just come to Jesus to observe or to criticize or to try to change his thinking. He comes and he falls down before Jesus. Don't you think about this? He falls down before Jesus publicly. The head of the synagogues, one of the synagogue leaders, falling down in public before Jesus. This is against everything. What would drive a man to do that? We see that in the next verse because he goes before, as he's on his knees before Jesus, he's begging is what it is, pleading earnestly with him. My little daughter is dying. That's what made him change. What would you do to humble yourself to get help? For this man, it was his daughter. You got to know in this culture, I'm sorry, when a boy in a town, for example, everybody's getting ready for the birth, the whole town turns out. And if it's a boy, the band plays, the wine flows, and everybody has a party. If it's a girl, do you know what happens? They pack up and everybody goes home. Girls, and actually the Jewish families were some of the strongest families in history at this time, really. But girls were not valued as much as boys were, and that's just what it was. But this father was willing to humble himself before Jesus and say, come, put your hands on her so that she will be healed and lived. Now, going on, it touched Jesus. He went with him. In the midst of the crowd, he started following Jairus back to his house. But the crowd hears something's going to happen, and they get excited. They all go with him. They said, can we come with you, Jesus? Let's go. We want to come with you. We want to watch. Something's going to happen here. There's going to be a miracle. We know there's going to be something big, and we want to see it. We want to be a part of it. So Jesus goes with them. In the midst of all the pressing of the crowd and people bumping into Jesus and everything, a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Now, this is the start of the story within the story. In the Jewish culture, a woman who's been bleeding like this would be unclean. Anyone who touches her would be considered unclean. If she went to the market, anything she touched, food, anything else would be considered unclean. And if you touched it after her, you would be then unclean. She's been thrown out of her house. She could not stay in her home because it made the home unclean. If she was married, her husband's probably left her, divorced her. We know that she's given everything she had to be made well, and nothing has helped. In every way, she's lost everything. Her family, her community, she has no hope. She's hopeless. And yet, she's here because she's looking for something from this guy called Jesus. And she spent everything on the care of doctors, and she just grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. In Luke, we know in Luke 8:44, it says she actually touched the fringe on the edge of his cloak. Now, every adult male Jew would wear a garment. At the end of it, there'd be 4 tassels. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And in every tassel, even the poorest Jewish man, there'd be at least 1 blue or purple thread in it. And that would symbolize their belonging to the family of God, that they were Jewish, that's who they were. That's what she touched. It's as far as she, as close as she was willing to get. So she comes up behind him, maybe crawling on the ground. If you've watched the Chosen version of this, it's very good. She actually crawls on her hands and needs to get up there, and she just touches that tassel. And look what happens. Because she's thinking, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. It says immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Now, she knew that she was healed, and she knew that she was freed from all of her suffering. She knew her life was about to change with all of this. She knew that. But at this point, it's private. She may be the only one that knew she was bleeding. She was the only one that knew that she touched Jesus. And she thought she could walk away and nobody would know, that she could keep it under quiet, she would be okay, that nobody else would know what was going on. Now, at this point, Jesus says, and he realizes that power has gone out from him. By the way, this is the only place anywhere in the Bible it talks about this kind of event to happen. That power has gone out from Jesus. It's nowhere else. There's no explanation. We have no idea what it means. But all I can tell you is He was so full of the Holy Spirit, you could touch him and apparently power would go out. He turned around and the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Now, you got to know all kinds of people were bumping into Jesus and laying hands on him, But he knew that someone touched his clothes. So he knew what was happening. He knew exactly what was going on. And he's not asking this for his benefit. He's asking it for her benefit. But also, I need to stop here for a second. Do you know there's a difference between bumping into Jesus and touching Jesus? Particularly when it says touching, that word touch really means grab hold of it with a purpose. You're really reaching for him. It's purposeful grabbing. You're really going, grabbing hold of that. There's a difference between bumping into Jesus and grabbing hold of Jesus. You with me? It's a whole different thing there. And the disciples kind of go, "Well, Jesus, I know you've been correcting us, but now we finally got you. There's hundreds of people that have been bumping into you. I mean, all up and down. There's just all kinds of people all around you. How would you know who touched you? How do you know this?" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. And at this point, the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down at his feet. Now, you know someone. This is a woman who has spent her life, at least the last 12 years, hiding, isolating herself, being invisible. She did not want to be seen. She didn't want to be cast out anymore. She hid herself from everybody. She had gotten good at being invisible. And now she becomes extremely visible. Is this because Jesus is trying to embarrass her? No. But he needs her to know something here. And she comes publicly now and falls at his feet in front of everybody. The whole crowd, everybody sees this is happening. And she's trembling with fear. Not because she's bleeding, not because she's healed, but she's trembling because she doesn't know how she's going to be treated by Jesus. She's an outcast. She has no worth. She's the bottom of the barrel, okay? If Jairus is the top of the heap because he's the head of the synagogue and everybody knows him, we know his name, she would be the very bottom. No, we don't know her name. She is, here's a woman, it's a cast-off. She's no value in their culture. Obviously, she sinned, somebody's sinned. She has no worth. And she's afraid that Jesus is either going to take away the healing or publicly do something, whatever. She doesn't know what to do, so she tells him the whole truth of everything. Can I tell you, this is one of my favorite scripture verses in the whole Bible, this next phrase. Jesus says to her, look what he says. To a woman who's an outcast, to a woman who's felt her whole life that she was isolated, to a woman that now, at least the last 12 years, has been cast out of everything, family, the synagogue, the temple. Look what he says. He says, daughter. Daughter. She has identity. To a woman who had lost everything, her identity, she now has, she's daughter. Jesus says, your faith has healed you. Now, it isn't that her faith healed her in the sense that she acted in spite of her fears, she came out in faith and came to Jesus. And that's what he means. Your faith has healed you. And he tells her, go in peace. You are at peace with me. You are at peace with those around you. You are not an outcast anymore. You have been restored to community. You're healed. You're freed from your suffering. You're set free from all that binds you, not just the bleeding, from all of it. You're now restored and healed. Now, you got to know something. As cool as this is, Jairus must have been going nuts. You think I get kind of nervous up here sometimes walking back and forth. Can you see Jairus? He knows his daughter's near death. And he's walking back and forth saying, come on, Jesus. I think it's really nice that you're healing this lady. But come on, we got to go. I don't have much time. I'm sure he's just dying up there going, please, can we go now? I mean, come on, let's go. He's not used to being told, wait. Okay? Jesus doesn't mind the interruptions. We do, don't we? But he says at this point, Jesus, while Jesus was still speaking, and I want you to catch something here. Not everybody liked Jesus. Not everybody thought he was worth even listening to. Look at how the servants from his house treat this. Jesus is now talking to the lady, saying these words. Some people from the house, his house, Jairus' house, come to him. The synagogue leader saying, your daughter is dead. They interrupt Jesus. They don't care what Jesus is saying. I doubt they even respect the fact Jairus is there. They know that what the other Pharisees have said. They know that Jesus is not worth listening to. So they just interrupt him and say, hey, your daughter's dead. Why are you, do not bother this teacher, do not bother the teacher anymore. I mean, they don't even see value, I think, of them even being there. I want you to get a sense of that, the disrespect in that. But at this point, Jesus overhears this conversation from those people from his house. Jesus tells Jairus one of the most important phrases, and because a lot of people ask me, Jeff, what's it mean to be a Christian? How do I live this thing? I mean, it's got to be more than going to church and going to Bible study or even doing devotions in the morning for, doing 5 minutes, praying a little bit. How do I live this stuff? How do I live out my faith to make a difference in my life and anybody else's life? Jesus says this phrase to this man. He's just heard that all hope is lost. His daughter is dead. Everything he was hoping for is gone. No hope. He's hopeless, right? And Jesus says, don't be afraid, just believe. The first thing Jesus says, don't be afraid. That means we have a choice whether or not we're going to be afraid. I hear bad news. Something's happened. You lose the job. The doctor says, I got some bad news for you. You get a phone call. You all know what I'm talking about. And at that minute, you have a choice. Will fear hit you? You betcha it will. But you have a choice. Am I going to keep being afraid? Or am I going to take a breath and say, okay, I am not going to let fear dominate me on this. That's what he's saying here. Don't be afraid. Don't be dominated by your fear. Because when you are dominated by fear, that causes you to close up. You cannot love, you cannot forgive, you cannot live, you cannot be creative. When fear dominates you, you shut down. It happens to everybody. That's the first thing Jesus says. The second thing he says is just believe. Just trust, just have faith. But what does that mean, really? Have trust in me. Believe in me. Take me at my word. That's what that means. I don't understand, Jesus. I know. Trust me at my word. Believe me with my word. But it's not enough just to say I believe that. I got to act on it. To the Hebrew mind, they would never say, I choose not to be afraid today. I'm going to act on his word. But if you believe that, if you believe that, then you've got to move with it. You've got to do something with it. And at this point, Jesus basically says, come on, it's time to put feet to that. We're going to go. And they start walking towards his house. And Jesus didn't let anyone follow except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they got to the house, now they hear a commotion. In fact, it's a ruckus. It's a huge amount of noise. At this, just a word aside here, if anybody who is Jewish at this time, even the poorest of the poor, if a man, a husband, if he had a wife die, you would have at least one flute player and two wailers. You would have to hire them to make a proper respect for your spouse. And somebody who was very wealthy and big in the community, you probably had a whole choir of people wailing and a whole bunch of flutes and instruments playing. But that's how they showed their grief. The noise told people walking by we're grieving. This is how they do it. In many cultures, they still do it this way. They wanted people to know they were hurting. They wanted people to know their hearts were broken. And so they would make a noise. But these would be professional mourners. They may not have known the child at all, probably not. And this is what Jesus came up to. And when he came in, he says, why is all this commotion and wailing? Why all this noise? But look at what Jesus says. This is Jesus' attitude towards death. He says, the child is not dead, but asleep. Now, they laughed at him. These are professional mourners. They deal with death every day. They know who's dead. They know when someone's dead, what that means. They deal with it every day, all the time. They knew this child was dead, and they laughed at him. But Jesus' attitude towards death, he came to break death. Death doesn't hinder him. He's not bound by death. Do you realize that? This is his attitude. For him, it's easier to wake someone from a nap it's harder to wake someone from a nap than to wake someone from death. It doesn't bother him at all. But they laughed at him, so he put them out. Did you catch that? I think it's hilarious. He took the mother and father and the 3 disciples that were with him, and they went in where the child was, and he took her by the hand. Do you remember when Jairus came to him? He says, I know you can heal, but you have to touch her. That's how you heal. He heard that. Jesus listened. So Jesus takes her by the hand. By the way, if you touch a dead person, you become unclean. But when Jesus touches her, Jesus makes her, she's not unclean anymore because she's alive. You know, when Jesus has that effect on people. But he says to her, little girl, I say to you, get up. He talks to her like she's alive. And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12. And I got to tell you something. I don't care how much faith you have, we are still astonished when God moves. I need to say that to you. We're still surprised when God answers prayer in a big way. When we really see somebody healed, when we really see a man or a woman change, when I see a circumstance radically different, because God obviously did something, it still astonishes us. I've read stories. I love reading autobiographies and biographies of men and women who've lived before us in the faith. And across the board, I love it. People who have lived their whole lives following Jesus, incredible ways, they still write about. I was really astonished when God answered that prayer that way. It blew me away. It was so cool to see what God did. I wasn't expecting that. These people were all greatly astonished, and he gave them, at this point, Jesus then told these 5 that were there not to let anyone know about this. But I want to look at this last phrase, because if we're not careful, we'll read over this. Why did it matter? Why does this last line matter? Why is it recorded? And told them to give her something to eat. It's actually parallel to what happened with the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. Remember, when she was healed, she was restored to the community. Jesus told them, their parents, to give her something to eat. In that time, at that culture, coming to the table means you're restored to the family. You're restored to community. Not only is she brought back from the dead to life, she's restored to them, to the family. She's restored community. Do you realize this is a glimpse of heaven here? When I go to heaven, when any of us in faith go to heaven, why is it so important to know that I'm going to my Father's house and there I have a seat at his table? He's prepared a place for me, a seat at the table. I am brought into community, because death does not separate us from community. Death does not isolate us. We're actually brought into the community, and we have a place to eat and share. So what do we do with this? Do not fear, only believe. My challenge to you as you think about all of this, Every day we get to choose, sometimes, many times during the day, is whatever's in front of me, is this going to shut me down? Am I going to be so bound by fear? Or am I going to say, yeah, it's real, but I'm going to lift my eyes a little higher and say, Jesus, I'm going to believe in you. You are God. You are the creator. You are the one. Death itself cannot stop what's happening here. You're bigger than that. You're bigger than the disease. You're bigger than getting older. You're bigger than this thing at work. You're bigger than this mess in my family. You're bigger than what this war over in Iran. All of it. I turn my eyes to you and I will believe. I will trust you and your word. And there's where I'm going to put, that's what I'm going to grab hold of. The challenge today is, what are you grabbing hold of? As you look at your life, I know you're here right now, but on a daily basis, what are you grabbing hold of? What shapes how you believe? What shapes how you live? It's very easy right now in our world to be shaped by fear. There's a lot of other things that can do it too, but are you grabbing hold of Jesus? Say, Jesus, I'm going to believe. I know what's real. I know what's happening right now, but I'm going to grab hold of you. I'm going to lift my eyes higher and say, I'm going to believe in your word. I'm going to trust you that you are who you say you are. Will you take him at his word as you come into his presence?